first of all, as we all know, let's remember to mute ourselves so that we can hear each other clearly. And then for those who might need translation, we have the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Please make use of that. We have a translation to French for this webinar. And then also we have the chat function. So please make use of that if you'd like to engage with other participants. Otherwise, I'm sure we're going to have a lovely session. Again, welcome. This is a webinar on alternative financing models for civil society organizations. And we are being hosted by WACSI and Star Ghana, which is very exciting. So I'm so happy and very pleased to see so many of us here. So as the webinar is starting, I have seen that many of us have their names saved. I think that's great. We can get to know each other and also we can engage during the webinar, but also after the webinar. We are going to see that we have so many ways to collaborate and so many issues that we can engage as civil society organizations. So the webinar today will focus on the asset-based community development model. And this is the first webinar. So yeah, my name is on the screen. Sorry, I'm Ruwadzano. I'm one of the WACSI Research Fellows, and I am going to be a moderator for today. In the background, we have the WACSI team assisting. So also feel free to reach out to the WACSI team. But let me continue and get this started. So the webinar today will focus on the asset-based community development model, which is one of the alternative financial models that we are looking at. As we are running a series, we have 3 webinars and today is the first one. The second one on social enterprise will be on the 26th of October. And the third one on social impact investment will be on the 30th of November. So you're invited to both the webinars that will come after this. And we are hoping that you will join us after finding today's webinar quite educational, but also quite interactive. So we will share the links, I think, in the chat box at the end of the webinar today. So as I indicated earlier, the webinar today will only focus on the asset-based community development model, which I find quite fascinating and quite interesting. So as we might have an idea, because there's this idea of community, there's this idea of asset-based, there's development, the model believes that communities can drive the development process by identifying and mobilizing existing but often unrecognized assets, thereby responding to and creating local economic opportunities. This model builds on the assets already in the community and mobilizes individuals, associations, and institutions to come together to build on their assets and not concentrate on their needs. One of the needs of civil society, and it's the primary need that we realize, is money. We need financial support, we need financial resources. So the idea of having alternatives is to try and counter the problems that we are seeing that many of the civil society organizations are facing for a variety of reasons. Much of our funding comes from international aid, but we know that as a result of COVID and as a result in changing priorities around the globe, we are seeing challenges in terms of accessing this international aid. So how can we think as civil society around diversifying our source of funding? How can we think around developing other avenues which are sustainable for our work and which are sustainable for the communities that we are serving? So this is what we are going to be focusing on today. And the webinar today is a chance for us to learn about this model, how it works, and how civil society organizations working in different areas can adopt the model and also even adapt it. This webinar, as I indicated, is for all civil society organizations working on different areas. It doesn't matter which thematic area you focus on. It's trying to find ways that civil society can diversify their funding sources, but also at the same time trying to understand that as different civil society organizations, we already have resources that are available to us, assets that are available to us that we can make reference to and start building on that. So the webinar will be recorded just for those who are not available, but also just so that we can always come back to what we are going to talk about today and make reference to the lessons that we are going to learn today. It's about experience sharing, it's about knowledge sharing. So please as we are going to take down notes, and also if you have any questions that come to mind as we're going to be having our speakers talking to us, please write them down. We plan to have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So today, I'm so excited that we have been privileged by the presence of two speakers who are going to share so much with us and who are going to make this session quite interactive and quite engaging for us. So I will introduce the first speaker, who is Omolara Balogun. She is the head of policy influencing and the advocacy unit at the West Africa Civil Society Institute. She's a seasoned development practitioner, civil society specialist, and advocacy strategist with over 15 years of progressive experience in development programming targeted at strengthening the civil society ecosystem in sub-Saharan Africa. Omolara offers strategic direction to the Institute's ambition to connect organized and organic civil society actors in thoughts and actions and influence regional and global policy discourses around good governance, democracy, human rights, and sustainable development. She is an ardent advocate for a participatory regional development agenda, civil society sustainability, and open civic space. She is certified COF, an international financial center, and a Change the Game Academy trainer. She sits on the board of Redefine Africa Foundations based in the United Kingdom, NAMOD Partners for Democratic Development in Liberia, and serves as advisor to many other civic groups. Omolara has an academic background in history and international relations, public policy and citizen advocacy, and peace conflict studies. So as you can see, she has so much experience, and her role today for us is to introduce the asset-based community development model to us, to talk about the concept and to show us how CSOs can adopt it as an alternative financial model for their organizations. Over to you, Omolara.
Thank you so much, Ruwazano Makumbe. I hope I got your name correctly. Good morning, colleagues. It's really a pleasure for me to be part of this conversation. And I really would like to congratulate my colleagues at WACSI who have been working earnestly on this project, ensuring that the future of civil society is not only secured in terms of the environment in which we work in, but of course, in terms of the access that we have to resources and financial resilience. So I'm really happy to be part of this conversation today. Having to talk about assets-based development, community development within 40 minutes is a challenging one. I'm going to try, since we would be merely introducing ourselves to this concept of alternative resourcing for civil society organizations. I'm not sure if I have the right to share my screen. I have a few slides to guide this introduction process. Mabel, please, do I have the right? I'm trying.
Yes, please. Yes, you do.
Okay, let me try again. Okay. I don't think I have the right. Can you check again, please?
Okay, just give me a minute.
Please, can we confirm if you can see my screen?
Perfect. Yes, it's visible.
Oh, fantastic.
I can see your screen now.
Okay, that sounds really great. So now I can't see myself, but I can see my screen, but I hope you can see me as well. Basically, when we are talking about assets-based community development, there are a number, like the moderator already mentioned, there are a number of alternatives that civil society, communities, organizations, including private sector entities, are now considering to diversify their resource base. So in the next 30, 40 minutes, I will be speaking on this 5 points. Why are we talking about alternative financing models for civil society? What conditions, warrant that conversation to start with. It's important for us to be on the same space, recount the context in which we are working as civil society, and the need for us to start thinking of diversifying our financial base. And then I will bring the ABCD concept itself. We'll talk about the different type of assets that we have as civil society community and what kind of principles and techniques that ABCD has to offer to help us in strengthening our resource base, and then how civil society organizations can identify and mobilize organizational asset to strengthen their financial base. So we would be looking at how this model of alternative financing model, how it can be adopted and adapted by civil society organizations. So before I move on, it may be, or it would actually be of benefits if we can begin to think of our organizations. Each time I mention the word community, you'll agree with me that civil society constituency in itself is a standalone community, and that should be applicable to the conversation we're having today. So why alternative financing models for civil society? In the time where there is dwindling donor funding, which many of us are pretty much used to, especially those of us who are familiar with assessing traditional donor opportunities and portfolios, having to assess resources from the likes of the multilaterals, the bilaterals, the USAID, UKAID, and all of that. I do tell colleagues that this is what most of the NGOs that we have in this part of the world actually birthed their existence in. We had access to resources to run our mandate from traditional donors, and very few local foundations, African foundations, had the kind of resources and still have the kind of resources to support the work of civil society. And the private sector, which most of us have tried to engage in terms of mobilized resources, have most often time returned back with their own agenda for financing developments in their own best way through the corporate social responsibility and all whatnot. The danger for civil society sustainability is quite apparent, and the kind of threats that it constitutes to the work that we do to our continuous sustainability cannot be overstretched at this point. We have seen instances where organizations who have, working in the same areas of work or even the same community have had to go into unhealthy competitions to assess the limited resources that traditional donors have to offer. And, in some cases, we have seen organizations struggle through the process of meeting donor requirements, of, meeting donor criteria, having to deal with the new trends around donor funding, having to bid, having to work in a consortium, and all of that, especially for grassroots-based organizations who may not have the kind of capacities that the big organizations often have access to. So what then? How do we ensure that these organizations do not die off in the next 5 years sometimes? And when we remember the kind of threat that COVID constituted to the global community entirely, it further reinforces the point that civil society needs to diversify its financial basis, moving away from being totally reliant on traditional donors, on foundations, and so on and so forth. So all of this gives the credit for the community, the civil society community, to begin to ask itself, where else can we get resources to support the work that we do? And when we're talking about resources at this point, we are not only talking about financial resources. There are different types of resources that every organization, every group of people, every entity needs to survive. Money is just one of it. We have material, we have human resources, we have natural resources. So how do we, expand that scope of resourcing our organizations as civil society community? And one of those, means of doing that is the assets-based community development or organizational development, if that pleases you. So what exactly do we mean by ABCD? So ABCD is simply talking about an approach that considers communities' assets as the primary building block for sustaining it. So a community, an organization, a consortium, a network, a coalition is required, to continue to look within its own existence to mobilize the kind of resources that will be used for its sustainability. That is looking inward for sustenance. Looking inward for sustenance. I think that puts it pretty much directly. And it also talked about drawing the strength of a community to build even stronger strength for its sustainability. So ABCD in itself, for an average organization, for an average community, for an average network or coalition, is talking about assessing the strength that you possess as an organization, as a community, and building on that to foster, your dreams, your ambitions, and all the things you intend to achieve as an organization. It also talks about identifying and mobilizing your asset. And we all know what assets are. If you own a house or, some properties somewhere, these are assets that an average individual we talked about. And every community should have one or two assets that is theirs. For example, if you're talking about my community where I live in East Legon here, East Legon is a community in itself, whereby the space in which the community exists within the map of the Republic of Ghana is its own. It cannot be transferred to another community. That's an asset. Nobody's going to take the East Legon community away from the East Legon resident. So having to identify the assets that you have as organization, as a community, is actually the beginning of an ABCD effort for your sustenance. And it's also about cultivating relationship among members of a certain communities, because sustaining, there is an adage, a saying where I come from, I think it's actually a very popular one, that there is no single person that can use the pronoun of our or we. It has to be I or me. But when we're talking about us as a people, then it means it's more than one person. Okay, so ABCD is really talking about cultivating relationships about people within a certain confinement, within a certain community. And it's also about allocating roles and power to every member of this community, because the sustenance of that community lies in our collectivity. And finally, it is believing that everyone within your organization, everyone within your network, within your coalitions, within your community has something to offer for the future of that community. And that is the very beginning of the ABCD model. So if you are going to be sustained as an organization in terms of resources, which goes beyond money, like I said earlier, then you need to begin to look within to identify the strength, to identify the assets, the physical assets that you have as an organization, the strength of your organization in terms of its vision, its mission, how it's perceived, outside, the credibility that you have built over the years, and then the skills and knowledge that your people have within the organization. These are assets that organization puts, into driving and strengthening their resource base. So basically, ABCD is a shift from a deficit mindset. ABCD is a shift from deficit mindset. An average organization, if you put 10, 20, or 100 civil society organizations together today, and they have opportunity to speak to one of the major donor entities in the world, the MacArthur, the Ford Foundation, the Bill Gates Foundation, they would most likely be talking from what they need. We need this amount of money to cover our overhead. We need this amount of money to get some assets. We need this amount of support. They will be speaking from a need point of view. But ABCD is a total departure from that mindset. ABCD is talking about you shifting your mind from what you do not have, from your needs, but from your haves, from the positives, from what you own. So it's talking about, if you can see this, this half-filled cup that I have put here, is talking about what is in existence in the cup. No matter the level of water that is in the cup, that is the beginning of your ABCD, not what it will take to fill up the cup. So ABCD focuses on how full part of the glass, i.e. the strength, the capacity, the assets of the organization. And there are so many organizations who do not even have an idea of the kind of assets that they have. In my years of engaging organization in ABCD, you realize that over 50% of what they are seeking for from external actors, they already have, and they don't even know. They don't see it. They don't even know they have it, and they do have it. And I believe colleagues in the house can bear me witness. Many years ago in WACSI, we also did not know what we have, how much we had in-house. There was a time at a point in the lifetime of these organizations that it seems like we were grounded about 12 years ago, until we began to ask ourselves questions. What else do we have to offer if donors are not responding to us? And the rest is history for those who have been on this journey with us for a very long time. So for so long, community organization members have only paid attention to the half-empty part of their cup, of their community, of their organization. They always talk, they always present themselves from the need perspective. What we need our own building. We need to do this. We need to do that. We don't have this, we don't have that. They rarely talk about what they have. And one thing I've come to understand in resource mobilization part of my work is that very few donors find it interesting to invest in an empty organization, because you're a major risk for them. So basically, when a donor comes to you, they want to see what you have been able to achieve by yourself or by the support of previous donors. If you don't have anything to present, you don't have stories to present, you don't have success stories or some 1 or 2, 3 achievements to present, then you are not worthy of my investment if I were to be a donor. So why should we? ABCD is telling us not to present ourselves from that needs and want point of view, getting away completely from the deficit position into positives. That's exactly what ABCD is talking about. I'll move on to the next slides now. So it focuses on the positives for every organization, for every community. And one thing I also understand is when you present yourself from the positives, you get more reception from people. And it's from colleagues, from partners, from donors, from the environment in which you work. But when you present yourself as somebody who is always needy, I don't know how many of you have 1 or 2 friends who calls you every time they need something. I'm sure you know how you begin to avoid their calls, because when she calls, she needs something. She doesn't call you when she doesn't need anything. That's exactly what ABC is talking about. Let's emphasize the strength that we have, even though we require more or additional support. Let's recognize the contributions of members of the community, of staff of the organization, of boards of the organizations, interns of the organization, partners, consultants that we work with of the organizations. Let's highlight the relationships and leaderships within the communities. Yes, it may not be perfect, at a time you're carrying out this kind of assessment, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There's no community that has nothing. Every community always have something. Most times they don't even see what they have. Its ABC also teaches the effective use of community resources, because most organizations find themselves at the very bottom of needs due to unchecked wastage. You know, and especially when it's external donors, we tend to want to expand the resources that we have. I was speaking with a colleague a couple of days ago, and we were trying to carry out an activity in one of our countries, and we started receiving quotations, you know, from different service providers. And with the way I was negotiating, she asked me and said, "Oh, you are too tough on them." And I'm like, that's just me. You want to ensure that what you are paying, you are gaining value for it, even if it's donor resources. Most organizations do not have that mindset. If the fact that you have budgeted $20,000 means that you have to spend it, even if we have to waste some. And this is a fact. I mean, I believe I'm speaking with my colleagues in the room today. So ABCD teaches us the effective ways to use community resources, because you know it's from your community, it's not externally mobilized. So you find it difficult to waste. And it attracts external actors to community successes. It's one of the strengths of ABCD. It's actually the outward facing of ABCD, presenting what you have, presenting your successes to external actors before you can get additional. I'll move on now so that we can have some time to talk. I don't know whether this is, I don't know what to call this engagement, a webinar, some sort of workshop, but in any case, we're gonna move on. So, like I said, most communities do not know the assets that they have. They do not know the kind of gold they are sitting on. They do not know the kind of resources that already exist within the community. They do not know the power, the strength, the contributions of people. And my executive director is quite an interesting human being. She tells me each time I have an opportunity to talk to her, she says, "You guys, i.e. the staff of WACSI, you are my asset." And hearing those words from her makes me feel good. It makes me feel, you know, really, really good that the asset it's for her. It's not about the millions that we have in our account or the big partners that we have. Little me sitting in front of her, she's telling me, "Omolara, you are an asset to this organization." Everyone you have in your organization at a point in time is an asset. How you are using them or increasing their values is a completely different game and a different conversation entirely. And these are the little things that ABCD tries to tease out to every community. Your people, if you are born from Texas, you are born in Texas, a state of United States, you are from Texas. And that is it. Even if you get to have a second nationality whatsoever. And that's why most of the people will ask you, where are you from originally? And that's why you can see the vibrancy of the diasporan communities, especially those from Africans. You are African. These are your people. This is your asset. The economy of the community is another asset. And this is where the monetary aspect could be of highlight. You know, how much do we have in our account? What is the size of the grants that we get? How much were we able to mobilize from that fundraising event? And so on and so forth. The institutions around your community plus your own is your asset. What kind of institution surrounds you? If your organization is based in East Legon, where we are based, which organizations are around you? What do they do? Do they have a mandate or some sort of programs that aligns with yours? What is the distance between your organization and theirs? These are assets that you need to latch on in case you don't know. The association that exists in your community, civil society, like I said, is a community. What kind of association exists in that community or within that organization? What are the groupings that you can find within a specific organization? What are their peculiarities? What do they bring on board? These are assets. The physical assets that you have, the space, your chairs, the computers, the cars, the land or properties. If you do, these are type of assets that you need to use to get what you want. You need to present to others that, yes, we do not have A, B, C, and D, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4 that we were able to mobilize ourselves, or through the support of other people we have worked with in the past. We already have our land. We just need to build on it. The stories of your communities is yours. It's your own story. It can't be stolen. It can't be taken away from you. How you tell those stories to get attention, how you tell those stories to touch the heart of the people listening to you, to make them shift their position. It's what it another level of conversation the organization needs to have. How are you packaging your stories? What channel are you using to tell your stories that will make somebody to say, you know what? I read your stories and I'm willing to be part of your journey. What is the history of your organization? So there are various types of assets that most organizations, most communities do not pay attention to, and they don't know how to use it to mobilize resources. I'm going to move on so that we get some time. So basic principles of ABCD. What are the basic principles of assets-based community development or organization development, if you like? It is completely asset-based. It speaks from what you have. If you are not speaking from the have point of view, you are not doing ABCD. If you don't have anything at all, which is almost impossible, you cannot even practicalize this model. You can adapt it because you have failed the basics of what we have. It is completely inclusive and participatory. ABCD is completely inclusive and participatory, regardless of the different layers of hierarchy that you have within the organization. Even your gateman, your security, your office assistant will have a role, because we are talking about the sustainability of our community. So nobody can be excluded. People must have their roles, they must have their voice, they must have their contributions. It is relationship driven, internal relationship driven before you even extend it to external. ABCD is completely relationship driven, cross-cutting with different, relationship between different levels of groups and hierarchy within the organization is one major factor for a successful ABCD, if ever employed by any organization. It is internally focused. It's driven from within the organization. It is driven from within the community. It is internally focused, having a thorough look at who you are as an entity. It is not about environmental scanning or, donor mapping or whatever. It's self-mapping, self-scanning. Where haven't we checked? Have we checked our interns? Have we checked our volunteers? Who brings or has something to bring? Everybody has something to offer. And the execution and the success of it, it's led by the people. It is completely led by the people. I'm going to move on as well. So when we are talking about how can it be led by the people, how can ABCD, be driven by members of the community? I just put a few pictures here. It talks about leadership, and if you have read a bit about the Gandhi kind of leadership, you would see that Gandhi used a lot of internal processing and internal strength to lead the people of India at the time that he did. So if you are going to radicalize, please can we mute our mics, please? I'm almost done, my apologies. If you're going to adopt ABCD in your community or in your organization, please, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Omar.
Okay.
We can hear you, ma. Go on.
Yes. Yes. So if you are going to adopt ABCD as an alternative means of mobilizing resources, then I will advise that you take a glance at the history of Gandhi, Gandhi's type of leadership. Completely internally driven about the people in his community, and they survived. It's about having certain skills. It's about having certain skills. It's about having certain assets within the community. It's about working together. It's about leading from the heart. It's about loving. A community of people who do not work together, who cannot agree, who cannot discuss, should not venture into using ABCD because they can't succeed. It's about working, fostering relationship. It's about teamwork because, like I said, everybody has a role to play if we must survive. So our survivor is basically our responsibility. And when we all have that clarity on that, it means we can't fail because we are all going down together. Until an organization can bring its people to that point where our success, it's everyone's success and our failures is also equally shared, then it's difficult for them to use, this model of resource alternative financing for organizations. I just put this here because it's important for us to know how different the needs and assets approach are to each other. So when I read most concept notes or you ask an organization for their needs, people have a lot of needs to make demands of. And when the same way when you are doing, I think, SWOT analysis, people can tell a whole lot about their challenges, about their threats. But when it comes to opportunity, then you see that the power of the energy level goes low. And you're wondering, so you know all your problems, but you don't know the opportunities. Where can we look into to address all these problems? And this is a major disservice to any group of persons, a major disservice. For every problem that you have identified, if you look deeper, you should be able to know what the possibilities for a change could be. So needs-based approach focuses purely on needs. It's response to problem, it's emphasize external support. We need to write to the donor. We need to write concept notes. We need to meet this donor. It's always neglecting, the within and focusing on the without. It's always about our solution is external. So we need to go out to bring this solution. It's not internal. It focuses on excellent service. If we render excellent services, then we can mobilize the kind of resources that we need. It talks about, the clients and the beneficiaries as our main source of sustenance. We need to therefore design very good programs in order for us to, survive. Whereas on the other side, asset is talking about focusing on what you already have, focusing on building opportunities. For example, if someone comes into your organization with certain skills and you identify this person could offer more if given this one or two opportunities, then go for it, because the first assets from that opportunities come to the organization. And most of my colleagues can attest to that. When we joined WACSI, we had very few skills that was good for WACSI at that point, but WACSI has made a lot of investment in us. So how are you investing in your people? If you believe they are your assets that could also, yield more assets, then you invest in them, no matter how little. It emphasizes on partnerships. We cannot do it alone. We need to work together. It talks about building relationships. It's community-driven and it's people-centered. The people are the major assets for any organizations. Now, very quickly, let me move to how you can identify and mobilize your assets as an organization or as a community. There's what we call the 3H skills analysis in ABCD, which means using your head, your hand, and your heart. What can you do with these three features of your body? The head is where we retain all our knowledge. The skills, we use our hands to execute our skills to execute programs and all of that. And then we take decisions with our hearts, having to internalize and process what we have heard and use it to take decisions that could progress the organization. So this is a recommended tool for any organizations considering the ABCD model. How can we use the head, the hand, and the heart. What can you do with that? You could, in your organization, have a section. There's something that we call smart section in WACSI, where we try to learn from the different people in the organizations, including interns, one skills or the others, or the other that our other colleagues do not have. And then you can carry out this exercise of what are the things we have in our head? What have you read before that is talk that you think the organization should know about? What other skills do you have? If you have been hired for an HR person, but you have skills in maybe drawing, some artistic skills or whatever, it could be needed. Bring it on board. Don't say, well, I wasn't hired for my heart ability. I was hired for HR. You are here, you are here. Partnership mapping. ABCD, in order for you to identify and mobilize your resources, you need to be able to map your partnerships within and outside. Like I said, the civil society community is a community in itself. So you can map your partnership within the community. Asset, what assets do you have? Physical assets, for instance, will include if you have buildings, if you have some computers, you have some printers, there's a way I see my admin going around to number some of these assets sometimes, the cars and all of that. How many of those do you have? How are you maintaining them? What is the natural assets that you have? Is there a train station in front of your office, or a tram station in front of your office, or a walk by, or there is a mall close to you, or what are the natural, assets around you, around your office, around the environment? If it's if it's a normal community, you may have a stream where people can fish, learn how to swim and all of that. Institutional mapping. What are the skills that you have within the organizations? What credibility have you been able to build over the years? What expertise are you known for? And so on and so forth. And the final one, which is really a critical factor in ABCD, is what we call the leaky bucket. How much of the bucket do you know? Where does your bucket leak? And I'm going to talk a bit about that, and then I'm going to stop. So the leaky bucket. So the leaky bucket helps us to see where and how to stop community leakages. I sit in my organization. I mean, we all go through, we grow. Organization growth it's essential and almost inevitable. So my organization has grown. There were times that you print something as simple as printing on a sheet of paper, on one A4 sheet. You've printed a draft of something you want to review, and then we throw it off. Now we have a place we'll keep them for others to use the other side of the paper to also print something they want to review. That is saving materials, saving the A4 sheet, using it twice, and it doesn't hurt anything. So there are so many organizations who have perpetual leakages, so many communities who have perpetual leakages and wastages, and they do not know. And these are the communities that often ask for more needs. They always need more, as much as they waste more. So the leaky bucket tells us how to see where and how resources are being leaked off in our communities. It helps us to see how to increase or to retain the water, the resources in our community. If you do not have a retaining culture, you cannot have adequate resources. You cannot be financially sustainable. It's not possible. And that's why when you see very rich guys, high net worth individuals, they make a lot of investment. They do not waste. They do not go after designers and, they want to wear Gucci and Louis Vuitton and all of that. It's usually people who don't have, who always want to wear designers. Just on the side. So how do you, stop the leakages from the buckets, from the organization? It's also the leaky buckets. This is a 5-day training, if not 2 weeks sometimes. Depending on the organizations we are training, the leaky buckets, the exercise of the leaky buckets, gives organization and individual the opportunity to assess the leakages, their expenses. What do they spend resources on every week, every day? Can one or two of these leaks be closed? It also helps us to identify opportunity to increase flow. The goal of ABCD is for you mobilizing resources from within and having that power to retain the resources without wasting it all. That's exactly what it's saying. So it's about taking action, linking, mobilizing, and organizing as a community, knowing your environment, what institutions and partners are in your environment, what natural assets are in your environment, what assets are within your organization, what kind of people do you have in your organization, what is your leadership style. All these things helps you to put together an effective ABCD. And there's a whole lot more that I cannot talk about at this very time because, this is not a training, it's just an introduction. So it has proven to actually be an effective model or an effective alternative financial model for civil society who have put it into actual practice. And I'm hoping that as part of this project, we would have opportunity to train people more on how they can adapt. It's actually working with an organization to build an ABCD, tailored ABCD for specific organizations where we do a whole lot of assessment and leakages, blockages, and all of that. So at this point, I'm going to stop here. I'm not sure if I spent 30 minutes or more. I'm sorry if I, took more time. I'm going to stop here and then I will take my time to read some of the charts. I can see about 87 of them and see if there are questions. Thank you so much. Madam Moderator, you have the floor now.
Thank you. Thank you for an absolute amazing presentation, Omalora. It was, I think, very educative for most of us. You kept saying it's not a training, but you provided that training, that background that we need. And I think for most of us, we will try to take it forward and find more information in it. But I've seen that we have actually so many questions. But before I get to that, can I just indicate that we will get the presentation, the slides that Omalora was sharing, we will get them and we'll also get a recording of the webinar. So at the end, I will kindly ask all of us or those who are interested in getting copies of the presentation and also the recording to share their emails or to use the link that we'll provide and sign up to get that. But Omalora left us with so much to think about. She challenged us to move from a needs-based perspective, which is what most of us operate from, and rather think about the resources that we have around us. And when we talk about resources, I think we're being challenged to realize that it's not only money that we need so many things outside of the money. So as she was talking, I started questioning myself, what are the resources that can we think about? And I want every one of us to think about what are the resources that we can think about from our own institutional perspective or from the perspective of the work that we do. If we are working in the communities, what are the resources that we can easily identify as being useful towards our work? I think if we start from there and if we start strategizing from that perspective, then that means that we see that, yes, we have A, B, C, D resources, and then we try to link them to how we can use them to address what we think are the challenges that we have or the problems that we have in our work or in our organization. But for now, I think we have so much to think about. We have been told about the importance of cultivating relationships. And in this webinar, we see we have over 100 participants. What is that? It's an opportunity for different organizations and different professionals and experts working in different areas to see collaboration, to see room for growth, and to see room to learn from others. So I can see we are making use of the chat box. I'm happy about that. We are sharing our contacts, and I'm hoping we are also going to reach out to each other and find ways we can use A, B, C, D. But for now, let's jump into the questions and have a conversation. We still have Omalora with us, so we can start with that. I had seen initially Al Hassan Yahaya's hand was up. Would you like to go first? You can unmute yourself, please. Al Hassan. Okay, they're not responsive. I will start with a question that I've received here. So I'll read it as it is, and then hopefully Omolara will respond to it. So it goes like this: when the majority of the members of a community are illiterate, they tend to want things done for them. Communication becomes a powerful tool to bring minds together on the needs of the community. What are the strategies for effective communication in such areas? So the question, Omolara, is what are the strategies for effective communication in such areas? You're on mute, Omolara.
I'm sorry, sometimes you think you can outsmart this text, but you can. I read the question. So when we talk about a group of people being illiterate, we simply mean they do not have formal education. They are not idiots. And when you go back to traditional African society, they are way more advanced than perhaps what we have now, as a then. So communicating in the people's language is the way out. And this is why most communities, you know, when we go into a community and we have to go with translators, I find it very difficult as a trainer to train with translators. Something always gets missing. It's a fact. Something always gets missing. So communicating, first of all, like I said, they are not illiterate. They haven't just been to university like you have. But when you talk to them in their language, they will tell you that they know what their community has done in the past and what they can do in the future if they get one or two supports. So using the community language to talk to them, using the community tradition to talk to them, using the whatever system they have. Some have associations, some sort of associational system through which they talk. Some have some cultural, you know, traditional system, kingship system through which they listen and all of that. If you're not coming with your American or British or university knowledge and ways of communication to talk to them, then you end up talking to yourself. So it's very simple. Using the community's talking and communication approach to engage them. It's very simple. That's the best way.
Thank you, Omolara. I think that is interesting, and also it makes us aware that as civil society organizations, sometimes we take up much of the responsibility. And I think through ABCD, we are being encouraged to not be the experts, but to rather facilitate collaboration and to facilitate and to encourage the community members to take ownership of projects that we have and to utilize the skills that they have. Okay, I will move on to the next question. I see Ronnie Nubi's hand is up. Ronnie, you can go ahead. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. Now, I wanted to ask in line with this, you know, most of these civil society organizations, the 100% donor funded, right? But I believe that it's possible to develop a strategy for sustainability. But then how then do we do that when in most cases, you know, when this funding, for example, it comes with conditions, with particular programs that you have to do. But as an organization, we probably have identified, you know, a challenge that is in the community and a possible project that you can do. How then can you manage, you know, to actually convince these donors to buy into the idea that, you know, communities know best the problems that they face and they can be an integral component of the solution in terms of coming up with a project that is really community driven? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear the question. It's a bit of, it was echoing. So if you can retrieve it for me.
Yeah, I will try to state what Ronnie said or the essence of it. I think he was asking how if we are to use the ABCD and to really adopt the idea that communities know best and the community members should be the ones to advise on, let's say, the problems or challenges that they are facing, but still we are to go back to the donors for funding. How do we translate the stories of communities, or how do we translate the knowledge that is coming out of our communities to donors and convince them that actually in terms of strategy design or in terms of problem identification, it's not supposed to come from the donors, but rather to come from the communities. So I think he's asking about best strategies on how to package this and make sure that it's convincing to the donors, so that we don't have inappropriate programs being designed, or we don't necessarily have agenda driven by donor organizations.
Okay. Thank you so much. So I hear two things here. You're trying to merge the ABCD approach with the usual approach of resource mobilization, speaking to donor. Now you wouldn't be doing ABCD at that point. Like I said, ABCD is totally talking about using your resources to self-finance and self-sustain yourself. It has no donor conversation, because it means you will still leave the people to the mercy of a donor at some point. That is still not sustainable. So we're talking about how do we assist a community to see their sustenance in themselves. This is completely outside the donor. We're not talking about, it's completely outside the donor. How do you support community? And that is why ABCD is not something that is transferable. You cannot use WACSI ABCD strategy for Plan International. You can't use that of Plan International for Care International. It has to be tailored to you, because you are in your own community, you are in your organizations, you know your do's, your don'ts, your failures, your successes, your histories, and your stories. I hope we get it. So if you want to support a people and you are saying you want to use the ABCD model, you are supporting them to see what they don't see in themselves for their self-sustenance. It has no external factor included. So purely, but now say as civil society organizations, you believe we're talking about having multiple financing models. So ABCD will be one of it. Our ABCD model cannot provide all the resources that you want. Then what it says may be applicable. So in that point, in that case, you need to package the ABC that you have done very well to entice external actors that, you know what, with the leader that I have by myself, have been able to achieve this. So I'm worth your investment. So an average organization can do that. But when you're talking about communities in themselves, it's how to sustain with what they have. If they haven't seen what they have, it's how to guide them to see what they have that they do not know they have. So there are two things. Like I said, I do understand that organization may want to have multiple means of mobilizing resources, and ABCD may be one, but not the only one. So they can mix it with some donor engagement and all of that. In that case, your ABCD should be well done enough to attract donor, or to convince a donor that, you know what, if I add to their little, they could do much more for themselves. So you are not being totally reliant on a donor, but you are presenting yourself in a way that a donor can see with little, you are not going to come back. You won't be reliant on me, you know, you can survive just with a little support. And that's, WACSI is a clear case of such example. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Omolara. I will move on to the next question. I see Mark's hand is up. Mark, you can unmute yourself. Mark, we cannot hear you. I think we lost Mark. Mark, you can use the chat function, Mark, if you're having trouble with speaking to us. I see Abdullah Balara. Can we also hear from you? You can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much. My name is Balar Abdullahi, and for Ghana Center, and I'm based in the Tamal office. For me, I think my own is not actually a question, but I just want to maybe make some comments or suggestions. And I'm happy that our speaker, I mean, when she was making her presentation, she was so much interested in the civil society space being the community itself. And I'm very, very happy to hear that, because realize that these days you have so many organizations that are operating, and you have 2 or 3 organizations that are maybe, let me use an example, working in one district, let me say maybe Karaga district in the northern region, and they are doing virtual the same thing. Let me say organization A and organization B. They are implementing projects. They are 2 all right, but you realize that their objectives or goals are almost the same thing. And I keep on saying that, why won't we always maybe try to reach out to
Abdullah, we have lost you.
Oh.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
This is Mark.
Ah, okay. Mark, you're back.
Yeah. Sorry. Due to the network, I was lost. Well, I want to say a very big thank you. Firstly, I'm the head of the Independent Societal Watch Advocate here in Liberia, and this is not really a question. And I must firstly, like I said, appreciate the West Africa Monitoring Civil Society Group. And one thing the chief said that I want to stress on is that she said sustainability of civil society organizations to where they operate is very key. You know, nowadays, for some of us, for my group, I'm operating in advocacy for women, girls, justice, peace, and what have you, less for today. You know, at times to sustain these advocacy, it creates problem. So I think it is important that we as civil society organizations in the West Africa region, it is about time that we must have a one voice to sustain all of us. Our thematic area where we function. 2 means, for financing in those, so at least we can have a reporting system so that at least we can be able to enhance and sustain our workings and advocacy. So that's where I wanted to come from. At least we all can have a strong backing so that we can be able to sustain ourselves financially, so that we can be able to raise our voice on these issues that are affecting our country, especially the region we find ourselves. The issue of rape, the issue of injustice, the issue of human rights violations, and what have you. So that's what I actually wanted to weigh in on.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark. I will just come back to you, Omolara. I have 2 questions which are related, and this go back to what you were talking about in relation to utilizing the people that are already within the organization. So starting from right at the top with the chief executive director to the interns. And the question that I have, 2 questions that I have are quite related. The first one is this: how do we bridge the gap between encouraging colleagues to use their skills when they were employed for specific purpose? So this, you raised this, and I think it would be useful for people or for everyone for you to talk a bit more about this. And then also the second question closely related to that is that it relates to empowering organizations' human capital with skills. So what can one do when staff have been empowered only for them to exit the organization, and then the organization is back to square one? So these are 2 questions that are interesting, but closely related, and you're the best person to speak to them.
I tell you, I read those questions, I'm like, man, we are going through a whole lot. And that's why I really appreciate the organization I work for, the West Africa Civil Society Institute. From time to time in our capacity building effort, we tell organizations that having to build capacity of your staff is one. Having to institutionalize the capacity, it's an order. What do I mean by that? First, you have staff that you have enhanced their capacities, you have sent them everywhere to learn one or two things. Then this staff decides to leave. Of course, they are now what more than they came into the organization with. So how do you ensure that you are able to retain not only the staff, but the new skills, the new capacities that they have acquired? Is you putting in place a process to institutionalize that learning. And for my organizations and other partners that we have worked with over the years, when you go to learn something new, you need to come and teach every other person in the organization, because if you decide to leave tomorrow, we can't hold you back. We are not running a slavery organization in WACSI. We can't hold you down. So far you meet the terms and conditions of your contract, of course you can leave. So an organization must have a process of, what's the word now? A process of domesticating new learnings from any staff, from the directors, from the managers, from an officer. You go to learn something new, which we do not know about. You come back within a week or two, you set up 1 or 2 sections to really download what you have learned for every other member of the team. This is what we call institutionalizing new learning, so that the power, the knowledge, the new skills does not reside in one person who can decide to leave tomorrow. And it also tells us to invest in the minds of our people. So it pains me when I see civil society organizations, development organization staff who operate as though they work for a bank. For you to be in the development sector, you are already, what's the word? You've already lost certain benefits. Something is driving you to be in this sector. If you want to make money, if you want your 9 to 5 and all those things, you stay in the private sector. Some of us are driven by humanity. And you can't pay me for that. You can't pay me for my passion for my work. You can't pay me $100,000 a month. You can't, because I know what my passion worked for me. So you see people struggling to survive in this sector because the mentality they have is that which fits the telecoms. It's that which fits the pharmaceutical. It's that which fits, even you can't do that in pure medics because it's humanly connected if you are working as a medical practitioner, if you get what I mean. So we try as much as possible to build a certain mindset into our people that is humanly connected, that is development driven, such that when you are with an organization, which now goes to the first question that you have, if you are hired for an organization to do A, and then you know how to do B by yourself, you can't say it's not my business, that is Charles's business, he should go do it. We are a team. You walk up to your supervisor to say, I actually have good skills in M&E as well. I could support them, for this time, even though I'm doing this. And then we can work out, some of those nuances within the organization. But you won't watch the organization to fail. Say, for instance, you are hired to be a receptionist in an organization, and you have to use the washroom at a point, and other staff are passing by the reception, and the phone is ringing. It could be your donor, it could be the director, it could be your partner, it could be a board member. We are all trained in my organization on how to pick the reception call. I'm a manager. I'm not hired as a receptionist in WACSI. But if I'm passing by the call, maybe I'm closing late at 5, the receptionist is gone, somebody is making a late call. Out of my being in WACSI, I pick the call. Sorry, they've closed. Can I take your number? And then they call you tomorrow. That doesn't mean I'm not a receptionist. So it's about changing mindset and making sure people are wired to where they are at a point and giving their best. Most time we do what is not necessarily contained in our job description, but it contributes to the success at a time. And that, if you can't do that, you can't use ABCD, do something else, keep writing proposals. One day you hit your million. You get what I mean? So I do recognize the problem of training people who then suddenly realizes they are worth, and then they move on. I tell younger colleagues, you want to make money in the development sector, don't stay more than 1 year in an organization, because the worst, at worst, they use your last pay slip to make you an offer, isn't it? But if you really want to make impact, then you really have to be committed to an organization for a period of time. And then you move, because you need to learn about the successes, the failures, the highs, the lows of an organization before you can truly say, I have been with this organization. You get what I mean? So we all face that challenge of people leaving when you have invested in them, but you now need to, design a system that helps people to download whatever they have learned to others, to share what they have learned to others. I mean, in WACSI, you do it within a month. You have to. You have to tell people what your training in Canada was all about. How can we use it in the organization? You have to submit a report listing the different new things you have learned. It's a must. And that's how we all learn different things, even though we didn't go for the training. So if the person leaves, some remnants will still be in the organization. So we don't lose out. I hope that answers the two questions. Yes, they are connected. It's a challenge, but there is a way around it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Omolara. I think it does address those questions. And really, what you're saying is what I think all of us know, but I think it's a challenge, and we are all being challenged as organizations, whether we are interns or we are managers, to take ourselves seriously and to take our job seriously, and also realize that we're doing it mostly for the benefit of the community, but not to enrich ourselves. I will take a question from Anthony. I think Anthony was the first, and then we'll finish up. We can take the last three questions. We have Anthony. I also see Emmanuel's hand and Fatimata's hand, and then we move on to the next speaker. Anthony? Okay, I think we have lost Anthony, so we'll move on to Emmanuel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So when you form an organization with the objective of helping a community develop, you are becoming more like an elitist kind of agent. That, in other words, you're bringing ideas to impose on a community. But the best process for ABCD is to do a sort of a questionnaire that elicits information from the community about their skills, their desires, what they need to see develop in the area. And then you want another questionnaire to see what businesses are there. And you merge these two together to form a sort of a database. Here is the need. Here are some solution toward that need. And once the community itself decides on what they want, then development can begin. If you impose on them, then you would have half-hearted approaches. People would reject it because everybody has a different opinion about what needs to obtain. So the best way is to elicit information from the community and see what they want. Then from there, we can move on. This is at least what is proposed by John McKnight and John Cressman in their building communities from the inside out. I think that's a good approach so thank you, Omolara, for that idea. But it's also important to have these kinds of questionnaires developed so that people can know at any given time what the community members are thinking, what they want, and how we can move on.
Okay, thank you so much, Emmanuel, and thank you for your contribution. I think it's also to encourage all of us after this to take the time and go back and study about the model. We have been privileged to hear from Omolara, but it's only the beginning. I think it's a task for all of us to try and read more about it and know more about it and try to then implement it in our organizations. So I know I had said we will take a question from Fatimata, but Fatimata, I will hold you for now and we move on to the next speaker, because our speaker, we want to hear from them, but they've been experiencing internet challenges. They're based in South Africa and there's a lot of load shedding going on there. So for now, I will move on to our next speaker, who is Bani Dolly. And Bani will talk about their experiences using the ABCD model and the challenges challenges and successes that they have faced. I will just give a brief introduction of Bunny before she joined us. She has been working in the nonprofit sector for the past 30 years, holding several positions from junior administrative duties to being the founding director for the past 20 years. She completed a PR and marketing diploma many years ago, and over the years has been privileged to have traveled extensively international and nationally in South Africa, attending various leadership programs, as well as facilitating various asset-based citizen or community-led development programs at grassroots level to academia and the corporate sector. She currently serves as director on the board of 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿 Social Housing, advisory board member for the Center for Community Schools at Nelson Mandela University. She is passionate about community-driven development and believes that nobody has nothing, and that our role is to unlock and unblock talent, latent gifts and talents to ensure that everyone can participate in their own development. 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿 Trust is a value-based small community grant-making organization that supports small community-based organizations who have already mobilized their own assets, and their funds are then the leverage they can use to further develop their projects and programs. And I think it's a good follow-up to Omolara and the conversation that we have just had. Thank you so much, Bunny, for joining us. I'm sure we are excited, and I will leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I am apologetic, and it's completely out of my control. So some of my South African colleagues who are maybe on this call will understand the frustration that we are going through in this country. Just as I was about to link up with the call, we had load shedding here, and I prayed that it wasn't going to be 2.5 hours, and it wasn't. So at exactly 6 minutes past 4, the electricity came on. But Carla, my colleague who's sitting about almost 2 hours drive away from me, has been keeping me in the loop of what the conversation was about. And so I did see some of the slides and the presentation that was done by the previous speaker. And a lot of that I'm not going to repeat. I think, so really you've given a brief around what 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿 Trust does. And I would invite people to just visit our website, and you can have a look at, the kind of reports that we produced over the years. So just in a nutshell, by way of introducing asset-based, community-led or citizen-driven development, we've been advocating this approach for a very long time in South Africa, and it just would not take root. But we were hell-bent and determined that we had to look for an alternative development model, because the needs-based model in this country has not got people out of poverty. It's not addressing issues of social injustice. It wasn't addressing issues of inequality. We're not claiming that asset-based community development will do that, but it certainly goes a long way to start planting those seeds in everybody. And again, going to the principle, which we all use internationally, part of an international community, that nobody has nothing. So the role that we play as an organization is to really just listen to people's stories, their aspirations, where they'd like to see themselves, help them to dream again. And in listening to those stories, able to help them to identify latent or potential assets that they have within themselves and in their communities. And I think what is really, really interesting is once people realize their capability and ability, because we do not talk about deficiencies, problems, they're there. But that is not the starting point. And I think a critical foundation for ABCD is what we call the appreciative inquiry. So we always start all our sessions, all our conversations with, what are you proud of about yourself? What are you proud of about the community where you live? Who inspires you? Tell us about a success story where you've been involved. Always start, and that appreciative inquiry actually gets people excited. It changes and shifts the mood in the room, and people just can't stop talking because suddenly they're focusing on that glass half full that was mentioned earlier on. Using what is in the glass already to address the issues that every community has across the globe gets people really, really excited. And I think for so long, all of us have been trained to look at problems, deficiencies, and challenges, and under the sort of whole guise that If we do that, we're probably going to attract funding. Funders are starting to shift their lens now. They're starting to say, you know what, we can't keep pouring water into this leaky bucket, and nothing's shifting and nothing's changing in these communities. So it's really, really interesting with 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬 Trust that we advocate this approach, and every community partner that we support has to first do asset-based training. Because they often apply for funding. We have an open policy around our community grant making. We don't have cutoff dates. We don't have limits. We don't have seasons. We don't have periods. People can apply anytime. However, part of that, the prerequisite is that they would have had to be exposed to ABCD. And often when they've been exposed to this philosophy and this approach, we don't call it a method. It almost has to be a way of being and a way of living. One workshop is not going to shift your paradigm. And I think what is really important in South Africa, what we've really been pushing because of our apartheid history, we have been pushing the paradigm shifting. It's got to be transformative. If ABCD is not transforming me as the vehicle through which this work must happen, then it's not going to happen at a community level. So you as the person who is actually advocating and pushing this agenda has to believe it yourself, because if you don't, it's very difficult to convince anybody else that this approach actually does work. So just as I say, in a nutshell, that's what 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬 Trust does. And we've seen people, and our grants are really, really small. So even less than $1,000 US, sometimes $2,000 US, but they're small grants, and they really just a co-investment in what organizations or communities are already doing. And that's the key for me, is we do not support any community that has not already started something using their own assets. And they may not even be aware of what those assets are. And our job, and what our purpose is to really start highlighting for them the wealth that they actually have. And it's not money. It's usually always around the human assets, the social assets, their physical, natural, environmental, cultural, whatever those other assets are. We very seldom talk about money first. And all we do is we use that experience and we leverage, and we call it a leverage fund. So we would support them with a small grant to really just move them forward and help them forward with what their aspiration is. And that's important. It's their aspiration and not 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬's mission. And once they kind of, you get them in tune with that, things normally happen, and they start then identifying other assets in their community and build confidence, because that's the big thing, is helping communities that have been on the back foot for so long to actually really just gain confidence. They know what they want. They know what they're doing. They know what their communities are needing. And that's really, really important for us, that we help them to shine the light on those assets in their community. And like we said, no community has nothing. Even though the picture may be painted for them that they're impoverished, that there's so much unemployment, there's so many social ills. But within that, there are golden nuggets and gems that we need to help people to discover, because their eyes have been blinded, because all they see is the tunnel vision. They're not able to see outside of that. And that is why paradigm shifting for us is the first step in our process. We spend a day and a half really just looking at shifting the lens, that transformative process. Because if we don't do that, it just goes right back to square one again. And people start talking about all the problems and all the struggles and all of that. But once I've made that transformation myself as the person who is the vehicle through which this must happen, then it definitely will have a ripple effect on everybody else around me. So that's basically what it is. How do we as organizations who work in community, what is our commitment to shift and change? Because if we're still operating through a needs-based lens and expecting communities, they're very quickly going to see that you're not being authentic, that you're actually really just trying to raise money on their back, that you're telling their stories. It's not our stories. We need to find ways of elevating the stories of community and celebrate, co-invest, collaborate, co-create with them. And as I said earlier on, we've been busy advocating this approach for many, many years, working with Cody. I've been to Canada so many times. I've been to India. I've joined all the international ABCD sessions, and we're a massive family across the globe, thousands of us. And some, I know Janine and others are on this group. Next week, and I'm hoping a lot of you will join, exciting 48-hour virtual unconference that is going to be presented by people from all over the globe. And if you listen to those stories, they're not different from our stories, but it's the approach to how people are actually, communities are actually solving their own problems and their challenges. And how do we then journey with, and I think that's really important, how do we become facilitators of these conversations? How do we journey alongside communities? How do we then become aware of our own power, but how do we also talk about power with community? And so the language that we use is also really, really important in the work that we do. And ABCD has a particular language, and the language is positive, the language is uplifting, and just using those words of what are you proud of, who inspires you, what do you appreciate about your family and yourself. You see people actually, their eyes light up because they've never been asked those questions before. It's always like, what's wrong with you? You know? So we've been doing hundreds of workshops. We've reached thousands of people. And so this is where the challenge is. We've had some success, but we've also had a lot of failure. And the failure is not because the approach is bad. It's because people, they just can't see it. Especially if you've worked in a dominant needs-based approach. And if you're donor-driven, then it's not going to work for you, because the minute you think that you've empowered or sufficiently helped the community to empower themselves, you're thinking that you're going to be without work. So imagine if all communities were mobilizing their assets, what a different world we would have. And so we've seen some successes in South Africa. We definitely are. And there's some beautiful stories, and every community has a beautiful story. So when we go out into the field and we work with communities, to ask them, tell us about a beautiful story that was initiated maybe by an individual or somebody who lives here. And what did that do for the community? Because storytelling is really, really, really important in asset-based work. So I'm going to stop there because I've said a lot in trying to rush to catch up with all the power outages. But I don't think the electricity is going to go off again. But it will be going off at my home at 6 o'clock, which means that I've got to be at home by that time. Otherwise, I'm going to be in trouble. Then I've got to jump over the wall if I don't get my garage open. Yeah. So I'll stop there, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. But for 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿𝐻, it's our DNA. And I think what's really important, it's from the top right through the organization. So we have a board of 5 trustees, and all of them can speak like I speak. They believe it. It's the way we work. It's our culture. It's the ethos of the organization. And wherever we go, that's our signature. People know that that's who we are and and how we work. So Carla is one of our key associates. We've got a beautiful online program that we offered throughout earlier in the year. We developed the material for online, obviously through COVID. And it's beautiful. And it's the elephant footprint, because we also believe, you see elephants at the back of me. We believe that once you've been in a community and you stamp this, it should transform that community if people buy into the whole philosophy and into the culture and into the method. Well, it's not a method, it's an approach. And there'll always be the needs, but the starting point for us is working from an appreciation rather than starting with the challenges. So I'll take any question.
Thank you.
Project in the
Okay, thank you so much, Bani, and that was very insightful. And it's always good to hear from people who have experience working with this model and also who have been seen so much success and interacted with communities that are also reporting so much success. So it's really lovely to hear from you. I think we are all inspired, and everyone on this call I'm hoping is motivated to try and adopt the model and also adapt it so that it serves the communities that they work with, but also serves their organizations. We'll jump right back into questions before we lose you, Donnie. Bani, I have one quick question from Emmanuel. Emmanuel says, when dealing with poor communities whose needs are very overwhelming, getting members to discuss community development takes a backseat to overcoming personal challenges. How can a group overcome the resistance that comes from such personal problems?
So it's a very typical question. The communities I work in are basically, most of them, I would say 90% of them, their major source of income is social grants from government. So every household, 80% of them, 80% of these households, it's exactly the picture he's painting. But who defines and what defines poverty? So we talk in the paradigm shifting, we talk about three poverties. We talk about poverty of the mind, poverty of the spirit, and poverty of the stomach. And you track anybody who's successful, who comes from these supposedly poor communities, and you look at how they've transformed their lives. Ask them how they did that. And more than likely, their poverties of mind and spirit are non-existent. They're strong. They have resilience. They're courageous. They're prepared to take risks. They're prepared to work hard. They're prepared to take opportunities and possibilities where they are. And they've shifted, you know. And I'm always fascinated by those stories because they're coming from the very same community we are talking about. But they've decided that is not going to define who I am. Doesn't take away the fact that they may still have challenges, but they don't start there. They're proud to share what they've been able to achieve using whatever opportunities there were. And I just did some training last week in the community where this was exactly the question, you know, and yet in the very same room, from the same community, there were 6 different stories that people were telling about how they use their talent and their gifts of the arts and poetry and music to have eked out a living in that very same area. But you'll always find people that will see the glass half empty. Your role as the facilitator is to bring them back, to recognize their gifts, their talents, and what the possibilities are of learning a skill. So we talk about mind, body, the poverty of mind, spirit, and body all the time. And my simple thing is, if the mind and the spirit is not in poverty, my stomach is never going to be empty because I will make a plan. I will know how to kind of work my way through and connect with people who can help me to realize my vision or my aspiration. So we got to bring hope. And that's a key thing for me. If you're going into community, already you as the facilitator, if your mindset is your poverty of mind and spirit, and we all have it. It's not just poor people. We all have it, right? There are days where I feel really low and I really don't want to engage with anybody. And I feel like I'm not good enough, even though I've been doing this work for so long. And the other days where I'm really, really in good spirit. And that's where my energy comes from. So we all do that. But I think, again, I'm talking about the way that we behave and our attitude when we enter these communities defines how it's the outcome, what the outcome is going to be. So if I'm going in already saying community A, and community A is poor and they're struggling and they lots of gender-based violence and unemployment and all of that, and I'm kind of stuck there, I'm never going to see the flip side, that it's also beautiful, that there's also social cohesion, that there's also lots of social assets, that people are happy despite not having the material, you know, that the material poverty is sorted, but they've got all these other beautiful things that are happening that you don't find in other communities. So I think the way that we talk about poverty, there's a key element in our paradigm shifting where we actually identify the poverties, and then we also look at the root causes of those poverties. And ultimately, yes, there are the basic needs that every community has, but ultimately every workshop I do, people concentrate on poverty of mind and spirit because they were like, we're depressed, we're stressed. And then we kind of like, okay, and the why? What's fueling that? And then let's talk about how do we then look for community solutions, or does it need an intervention by a professional? Perhaps it's gone too far and maybe we need to bring, so you really have to be on your toes. But as I say, my experience, once we get over the mind and spirit stuff, people easily see solutions to the poverty of the stomach. And I mean material poverty, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Benny. That's very interesting. And I have an additional strand related to the first question. They have made it even more interesting. So talking about the same difficulties that people may face, or that facilitators may face when they're trying to introduce this kind of approach to communities, how does the response that you've given us, and how does that approach apply or even change when it comes to communities in emergency situations or in crisis situations? Is it even possible to apply these models in such situations, or there is a tact to it, there's a strategy on how we can approach communities and still be able to see successes from an ABCD model where there is a crisis situation?
Well, and again, you know, that's not unusual. And we have many of those crises in this country at the moment in particular. So there's a lot of, I mean, we've had flooding, we've had all kinds of things happening. Of course, you can't then go in and say, well, sorry, let's first take stock of what we've got and all our assets. It's an emergency. So it's a very different approach. But you can't be stuck in an emergency all the time. So once we've dealt with that crisis, how do we then go back and draw on our assets? So would we prevent maybe the crisis from happening again, because we're now better geared up? We have an asset inventory. We know what to do. So it's not always appropriate. And like we were saying, ABCD doesn't work for everything. It doesn't work. It's a predominant model that we use, and the worldwide community does, the global community. But of course, there are always going to be the situations, and you can do both. You can do both actually equally well. But if you're stuck in one and not cognizant of the other, then that's also being quite naive, you know? So if you're stuck in ABCD, it doesn't matter if the world's burning around me. Nope, we first got to do all these assets and inventories. It's not going to work, you know? So you have to balance that out. But it's really only in those crisis situations that we would then say, well, if we need to put that fire out, the water is the most important, let's do that. And then let's say, how do we prepare better for the next time, especially in informal dwellings like we've got in South Africa? I'm sure you've got them elsewhere, where there's a lot of shack dwellers, and one fire is a danger to an entire community. So how do we mitigate, you know, by using this approach and saying, look, we've had the experience, this is what happened. So the next time, let's ensure that we have, you know, access to water, that we have fire canisters, you know, one of these spray things. And that's what we've just done with the university here. They've actually, they've invented on campus, they created something. And so all the communities where we're currently working that are part of the university partnership, they have now these sprinkler things, foam things, because they don't have access to water, strategically positioned. So all the community members know that if there's a fire, that's where it is. You know, so we were able to mitigate some of these. But yeah, that's my response. Won't always work in emergency, but we don't operate in emergencies all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to also step back, you know? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Benny. I think we have been having an interesting conversation, and even with when we think of the examples that Benny has given us, and we look at what Omolara, the background and introduction that she provided us, it's rich information that we can all make use of in terms of our organizations, but also going back to talk about those who were not able to join this webinar, and even to feed into the webinars that we are going to have in the next few weeks, the next one on social enterprise and the other one on social impact investment on the 26th of October and on the 30th of November, respectively. So if you have any questions for both Benny and Omolara, we are opening up the question and answer section to have a conversation and to have a discussion and possibly to chat a way forward together on how we can try to adopt this and try to adapt the model to work for us. I will start with Fatmata. If you're still with us, please unmute yourself, and if Ben is available to hear your question. Fatmata? Okay, I think we have lost Fatmata, but I see we still have Abdullahi Balara. You also had a question. Abdullahi? Okay. Abdullahi is not responsive as well. Oh, I see Fatmata is back. Fatmata, is that you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for very interesting conversation. I think what Benny has said, I buy into it. Being a development practitioner for the past 30 years and learning from the experience that I acquired and also learning from the knowledge and talents of communities, I believe this is the right way to go, right approach. We need to really transform the paradigm by shifting it, looking first of all at what people have and recognizing, appreciating what they have, helping them to discover what they have in terms of wealth, and helping them to really know that poverty is in the mind. Poverty is not only for the stomach, but as she rightly says, spirit, mind, and what else did she say?
Stomach.
She said poverty is for the mind, the stomach. So we need to rethink our way of developing by using the bottom-top approach, being in a position and commitment to really learn from the grassroots. We might underestimate what they have, but if you appreciate what they have and you help them, you empower them to know what they have, then there is sustainability. You cannot talk about community development or ABC if really we're still using the conventional type of development. I've worked for the UN for the past 22 years, and I realized that that's what some of the experiences that we have missed opportunities to really have sustainability, to have impact, to have that ownership of development by really using the top-bottom approach. I buy into that, and I think the conversation we should be having right now, which of course shows the seriousness of WACSI in helping communities move away from this donor-driven, all the time donor-driven. You cannot have your integrity and have your independence and self-reliance if you still continue to be donor-driven. So thank you so much, WACSI, for inviting me to this important conversation. And I also am happy that the experiences we have exchanged so far from what he has presented to Benny, we need to look at, particularly, I love the elephant, the symbolism of the elephant. Excuse me. We need to use that. How do we expand our knowledge as institutions to be able to be closer to communities and help them to finally not always be in the community, but always trying to empower them so that we move from one community to the other. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fatmata. I don't know, Benny, if you'd like to say a word or two before we move on to Abdul's question.
Thank you so much for acknowledging and also your own experience. And you're absolutely right. But again, you know, for me, it's really, really important. And it comes back to those of us who facilitate these processes in community. You know, how to also regain the confidence of community where they've been let down so badly by so many. I mean, I've seen some shocking development practices in my experience, in my lifetime. And I'm like, how the hell can donors fund that? You know, where you've undermined communities completely, you've taken their voices away, And a lot of us who run, who are behind NGOs and who consult or whatever, we're responsible for a lot that is going on in these communities. Because like I always say, a donor gives you money for solutions, don't add to the problems, and we exacerbate the problems to give ourselves some legitimacy. But I've seen the damage we've done. So we need to acknowledge that we are also responsible for a lot of what is not happening in communities in the way that we are wired and the way that we work as organizations. So I'm really, I think once you embrace the principles of ABCD, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be for everybody. But once you embrace the principles, it's very difficult to go back and do things the other way. And I mean, I share it openly. I had a massive family trauma last year where my husband died from COVID. And if I wasn't a practitioner in asset-based citizen-led development work and working through this process and method, I don't think I would have managed as well as I am, because it taught me resilience. It's not easy, but it's taught me to kind of step out and step in when I need support, when I need, like my associates. There were times where I couldn't facilitate and they could step in because we're from the same DNA, we're the same family. It builds community, it builds practitioners, it's a lot of it is personal development. It is about the self-care, being very aware of your own limitations, but being able to be brave enough and step out and say, please, will you do it? Because I'm not going to manage this. So it's not just for communities, it's very much a personal transformative process that is lifelong, Thanks. I don't know if it answers, but yeah, thanks for the comment.
Thank you so much, Benny, and I'm really sorry for your loss. But thank you for highlighting also, but Mata, thank you for highlighting the importance of cultivating on relationships. There's, I think it's Omolara who was talking about how we need to understand that it takes a village. So also appreciating the work that colleagues are doing, but also the work and the skills that we have as civil society organizations, instead of, being in this competitive cycle that we are finding ourselves in. I'll move on to Abdul for a question. Abdul, you can unmute yourself.
All right, thank you so much. Our brief condolence to you, Madam, for the loss. And my second appreciation goes to WACSI for bringing this forward, and also to the facilitator for the wonderful presentation, because this goes a long way in impacting the communities that we are working with. And it goes hand in hand. Without best practices, there cannot be a change in the society. And I will encourage WACSI to organize more of this sort in place for us. And also to other participants, thank you so much for making this happening. We are each other's keepers. And as we have agreed to be the change agents, the change that we want to see in the world, there's a need for us to keep up the good work and see ourselves as agents in anywhere that we find ourselves. So thank you so much. May the good Lord be with us and grant us long life and more opportunities to serve Mother Earth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abdul, for your comment. I will move on to Kala. May you please share some perspectives based on your experience. Benny mentioned that Kala is a colleague, they work together, and I think it would be interesting to also have some insights from Kala that we can take away today.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I'm not too sure what else I can add. I think the previous speaker and Bernie covered most of it. But yeah, I think where the first time I was introduced to ABCD, I started working for a nonprofit organization in Port Elizabeth. And I really had no idea what I was doing. I studied anthropology, but here I found myself in a development or in an organization where I had to kind of project manage things that were started by people from the outside. You know, it was like a top-down approach, not an inside-out approach. And I felt completely lost with what to do. And then luckily I met Bernie. You know, so actually someone sent me to Bernie from the organization, sent me to 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿𝐴 Trust to see if we can actually get funding from 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿𝐴 Trust, because they're a grant maker. And then Bernie just started talking to me about ABCD, and I was, you know, it came at the right time, and I was it just resonated with me completely. So when Bernie says it's in our DNA, it feels like, you know, some of us just, we get it when we hear about it, and we come across it, we just get it, and it resonates with us. And it's so my journey with ABCD started with 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿𝐴 Trust, and I went to so many workshops, and I got trained as a facilitator, and Bernie and I have facilitated so many workshops. And what I really love about 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿𝐴 Trust is that they go to the places like in the Eastern Cape and in South Africa where other funders and other people wouldn't even dare to go. You know, it's so hard to get there. But Bernie we would hire a bakkie full of stuff, and we would often get lost, but we would get there and we would facilitate a workshop, and it's just it's amazing. And I think it's so simple. It's such a ABCD is actually so simple to understand by anybody, whether you've had a high quality education or nothing, no even tertiary education at all. So I love how accessible ABCD is. Excuse me. And now I lost what the last thing I wanted to say, but I love how accessible it is, and whether it doesn't matter your background. And I can't remember the other thing now, but thank you so much. It's been an amazing journey, and so great to see how it is spreading all over. And even though we are on opposite sides of the continent, your conversation is so similar to our conversation here on the southern end of South Africa. I would like to also to say thanks to you and to 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿𝐴 Trust for carrying on, because it's not always easy. Not everybody gets it, and some will never want to change because it is a bit more difficult. It can be more difficult because it's not to ask and receive something. It's actually say, like, putting the power back in the community. Like, no, like everybody here is actually going to do something for themselves, which not everybody wants to do. It's because, especially if you've been used to receiving all the time. I love the approach, and it's great to see how it's spreading around the continent. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Kala, and thank you for sharing your insights and the struggles that you are facing in terms of also trying to spread the word in South Africa, and see that the model is adopted by as many organizations and as many communities as possible. I will give the floor to Omolara and also to Benny for final words, for last words of encouragement, for insights that they would like for us to take home, in addition to what they've already said, just 1 minute each. And then if we don't have any further questions, I think we're reaching the end of the webinar, but it's only the beginning, like we indicated. This is the first webinar in a series of 3 webinars. So let's stay motivated, and let's stay interested to learn about this alternative funding models. Omolara, I will give you the floor now.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thanks, Benny. Good to see you again. It's been a very, very, very long time since I left Coady, but it's really exciting to see you. I think it has been reestablished over and over again that for civil society to be financially sustainable, it is important that we diversify our funding portfolios. And ABCD happens to be one of those models that have been used over the years, and we have interesting testimonies. And I would strongly encourage that in our diversification, we should consider, like I said earlier, it doesn't have to be the only one that you would consider as an organization. It's always good to have a mixed bag of alternatives. You know, it doesn't stop you from your regular donor, a traditional donor engagement or fundraising event or consortium building and biddings and all of that, or consultancy services. But it's always important that you have something that you have total control over, and that is you, something that you own, and that is the premise of ABCD approach. So I would generally recommend it to everyone. Make sure you have an ABCD system somewhere that you can always fall back on should every other model, you know, fail you. And you should have something that you have control over. Your people are yours, your space is yours, the asset you have is yours. How can you, you know, translate that into strengthening your own sustainability, your financial resiliency, and so on? I think it's very important. And then secondly is that, yes, it's not something that happens in a day. We all at one time or the other are to build our capacity on how to do it. And like I said earlier, it is not something that is transferable. You cannot use the ABCD model of a particular community for your own community. Don't forget, you will be latching on the things that you have. So you can always work with expert people who are quite familiar with this model to work with you to see what you don't see about yourself, what you don't know about yourself, areas you never even imagined to be an asset for you. These experts are, you know, we have been trained to, you know, interrogate, assess, map, and let people see what they have, but that they do not know that they have, and now they can, you know, utilize it. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if you would like to work with us, or Benny or other experts who are quite familiar with this model. We'll be happy to do that on individual and institutional basis as the case may be. Otherwise, I think it has been an exciting exchanges today. I'm happy to be here, happy to see Benny again, and I look forward to the next round of conversation, I think next month or later this month. So I will follow up with colleagues and then be part of it as well. Thank you so much, Madam Moderator, and to the WACSI team who have worked tirelessly on this. I'm so proud of you, and thank you.
Thank you, Omolara. Yes, you said we'll have the next sessions. We'll see you there. The next session will be on the 26th of October on social enterprises as an alternative funding model. And after that, we have the last webinar, which will be on 13 November, and we'll be looking on at social impact investment. And please, we are sharing the links for you to register in the chat box. Please do register. We are also sharing the links for you to receive the recording for today's webinar. So please do sign up on the form. Next, I will ask Benny to just give us a few words in a minute or two. Thank you, Benny.
Thanks very much. So just to echo what everybody else has said, and just to echo what Carla was saying, I think the beauty of ABCD is it's so adaptable. It's so flexible. So I work both at the university, the local university, where we've trained from the dean throughout the faculty in social development, and they incorporated ABCD for social workers in training now. That was huge for me because I've been visiting this university for years and talking about ABC on different platforms until social development, the Faculty of Health Sciences said, our social workers are not sufficiently trained in community development. Please come and train all of us. So that we're really excited. So the footprint's expanding and so adaptable in terms of taking it from a community into a university, into corporate, into an NGO sector, because the tools are so adaptive. And what's so beautiful about what the university did, they actually turned the leaky bucket, which is the financial tool, into an emotional bucket and use it now for couple counseling. So you can imagine, I mean, this whole analogy of the bucket, what emotions come in, what is leaking out. And somebody's done their whole master's thesis using the leaky bucket for couple counseling. So very excited. And I'm excited. I think there's hope. I think for me, that's what all I want to say, that once you've applied the principles and they're part of your DNA, and you kind of start living them, you won't go back to doing things, and it's good for you as a person. And it gives me hope that despite South Africa's woes and troubles and every other country, I'm hopeful that if there are more of us that push this agenda and push this philosophy, that we will heal, that we will be able to overcome the challenges. So I'm excited that there were so many people that at least heard about it. Whether they're going to embrace it, that's not my problem. That's theirs. They'll be sorry if they don't. But we're here. If there are any resources we can share, and I'll definitely share the link later on. Maybe I'll send it through so that people can log on and register for next week for this beautiful, amazing, a lot of people put a lot of hard work into it, and it's going to be a fascinating journey. So I invite people to join us next week. But thanks again for the invite. Sorry about the load shedding, completely out of my control, but at least I was able to still participate and give some input. And I do have a PowerPoint that I can adapt, and I'll also send that through. So when you send the recording, you can have a couple of PowerPoints just from what we've developed ourselves. All right.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Benny. And we really appreciate your presence and sharing your experience. Omelara, Benny, and Carla, it has been such a splendid time together. It's been a privilege to hear about your work and to hear about your experiences. I'm sure everyone really appreciates it, but unfortunately we have come to the end of our webinar today. We are looking forward to the next webinars, and we hope you come back in your numbers. And in the next webinar, if possible, we'll start by obviously recapping today and seeing what you took forward from today, because we have almost a month. So it's on the 26th of October. So we have almost a month. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, we have almost a month till the next webinar. And that's to challenge us to take steps forward towards adopting what we are learning, adopting the new models that we're learning about. But thank you so much for joining us today. And please use the links in the chat box to get the recording for today and the slides, and also to register for the next 2 webinars. Have a lovely day and enjoy the rest of your week.